Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to the Mind by Design podcast. In these episodes, I network with like-minded professionals in our community. I always say that it takes a village to support our community, and the more specialists I know, the better I get at referring families we work with to those who might be a good fit. Today, I connect with Tricia Minarik, owner and therapist at DBT Center of Silicon Valley. They treat adolescents and adults. Enjoy, and thank you for listening. All right. Well, welcome, Tricia.
Thanks. Nice to meet with you.
Yeah. Nice to meet with you too. I would love for you to introduce yourself, tell me about your company, and tell me what you do.
Sure. So my name is Tricia Minarik, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed professional clinical counselor. I'm with DBT Center of Silicon Valley. We're located in San Jose, and we have an outpatient clinic that serves clients who have high-risk behaviors or difficulties with emotion dysregulation. We have comprehensive DBT for adults and for adolescents. An adolescent program has some parent involvement, a multifamily group, as well as options for family therapy with a DBT perspective.
And how do people find you or know that what you have is what they need?
Oh, that's a great question. So a lot of people get referred to us from higher levels of care, like maybe they're stepping down from a hospital stay, or they've been recommended to do an intensive outpatient or partial hospital program. And then in the course of that treatment, often providers will recommend DBT because DBT is great in the sense that it teaches people a lot of strategies that they can use when they're dealing with difficult emotions or urges to do something problematic. And there's that component of the skills training in a group setting, which allows people to do a lot more in therapy in a short period of time. The skills group allows them to kind of put their current problems a little bit on the shelf while they're learning new strategies, and then they get back into individual therapy with us, DBT individual therapy, and they're figuring out more about how do I use those things that I learn in my day-to-day and the problems that I'm facing right now.
Great. Can you tell me what DBT stands for?
Oh, of course. I always forget to do that. I apologize.
That's okay.
It stands for Dialectical Behavior Therapy.
Okay. Can you give me an example? Like, let's say you had a teen who was referred to your clinic from a higher level of care. Number one, I want to know, like, how frequent are the sessions that they do? How do you figure out how much they need? And then like an example maybe of what that looks like with the group and the individual and kind of learning and then practicing how to actually implement a skill.
Oh, sure. I'll try to do that. So initially when people come in, they do 4 individual sessions called pre-treatment. And with our teens, the families are involved in that process as well. But that's an extended period of assessment and treatment planning where we're doing just that. We're figuring out, is this the right fit for the client? How much treatment do they need? Is DBT maybe too much for their needs? Or could they benefit from, something even more intense than what we provide? Standard DBT is once a week individual DBT therapy and once a week the skills training group. And then clients also have access to their individual therapist for skills coaching, and that's throughout the week. So they can reach out to that therapist pretty much as they want to or need to for help implementing the skills and just getting through maybe high emotion or a crisis situation. Hopefully we're catching them before they get to a crisis situation and they're thinking about, ooh, this is a place that I can use my skills, but I don't quite know what to do. So then they reach out to the therapist and get that help.
And that's different than a lot of therapy where you put kind of a firm boundary on, you have your session, this is the time that you get with your clinician, and that's it for the whole rest of the week.
Yeah, exactly. Our clients often really love that availability of the therapist and that ability to kind of check in with them throughout the week.
Yeah.
And parents also, I think it helps them feel some sense of peace that, okay, their teen has somebody else to connect with if parents are kind of at a loss. And parents, when they're going through our program, they get a skills coach as well. One of the trainers in the skills group coaches them.
Great. And do they do that as a group or do they do that as just the parent kind of uh, couple?
So parents participate in the skills training group with their teen.
Oh,
That's one of the things that I think really makes our groups effective for teens is that parents are learning the skills at the same time. So they're figuring out how to regulate themselves, handle conflict with their teen differently. They're modeling their skills use at home. They're using the same language around what skills they're all learning together. And so then the skills trainer, we have two skills trainers for each of our groups. Whichever one is not the individual therapist for the teen, or sometimes, the skills trainer or the therapist for the teen is not the skills trainer at all. So as long as the skills trainer that is familiar with the family is not the individual therapist for the teen, then they can become the skills trainer for the parent. And that's ironed out right at the beginning so that parent knows who they can contact.
that's great. Okay. And then can you give me an example of like a hypothetical, something that maybe someone is working on in group and then what that may look like in individual and what they might call, what they might have to reach out for in the moment?
Yeah, sure. So we get a lot of teens who are struggling with self-harm behavior or maybe thoughts of suicide. We'll think about self-harm as the example here. In our groups, we ask because they can be contagious behaviors that participants do not name, urges to cut or just to commit suicide. That can cause other group members to have their own thoughts and to get distracted from learning the skills. But as they're in the skills training, they're learning about, okay, what are the emotions that might precipitate those urges? And how do I regulate those emotions? Or if I'm only aware of the urges, distress tolerance skills are really about figuring out how to handle those urges without doing something that makes the situation worse, right? Without acting on, oh, I'm going to cut right now. So if a client is learning, tip is one of our skills, for example. There's 4 different things that are in tip, but the first piece of it is putting your face in cold water. It activates the mammalian dive reflex. It helps people get their parasympathetic nervous system working really quickly. So they get a brief break from that distress that they're dealing with in the moment. And it helps them then maybe move on to other skills so that they can stay away from the self-harm behavior. So if a client's learning tip 1 week in group, and then they're assigned homework to try it throughout the week, let's say a teen is, really trying to stop using cutting as a means of self-regulation or emotion regulation. So let's say they have some kind of conflict with a friend and they're feeling really sad, maybe really angry. They can reach out to their therapist and get coaching on using tip instead of cutting to help them regulate their emotions. And those calls are really brief. We're not trying to get the whole scenario of what happened with the friend. We're looking at what are your urges? What's the emotion? Okay, now we walk you through using the skill. And then we revisit when they're back in individual therapy.
Yeah. What if, at that moment that the teen is needing support and the therapist is busy, how do you, is there like a go down the list kind of thing? Because I imagine they're in kind of a critical state at that point.
Yeah, very often they are. So one of the very first things we do with new clients is get a crisis plan together.
Mhm.
So the therapist and the teen is walking through what are the steps they would do if they try to reach the therapist and they can't. So there's other simpler, maybe less complex skills that they've learned in those first few individual sessions that they can already implement on their own. But if they aren't able to get in touch with the therapist right away, then we often will, encourage them. There's other contact numbers they can reach out to, emergency numbers. Sometimes it's contacting a friend. Of course, it could be the friend that they're having conflict with. So we have a few different numbers for them to think about putting on their um, crisis plan. But generally, we also, want them to practice tolerating and not just going to, reaching out too much externally, but figuring out how to use the other strategies that they've been learning. And our policy is to reach back out to them as soon as we can. So for the most part, it's within an hour, within 2 hours at the most, if we're like in a session and can't get away.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some other, besides self-harm or suicide thoughts? What are some other things that are kind of like high risk or like high emotion, or behaviors that you see, because I assume that this is for more than just kids who are doing self-harm. And I don't want people to think like, oh, my kid couldn't benefit from DBT or we couldn't benefit from DBT because it's not that bad. What are like some other things people come for?
That's a really great point. So they might come for like the school refusal or like sometimes it's, yeah, kind of more the depression kind of side of things, like not getting out of bed, not being engaged in their lives. Sometimes it's the interpersonal difficulties, right? Maybe it's lashing out verbally, either at friends, at parents. Um, we'll see a variety of eating disordered behaviors. We can definitely work with that. If somebody, is needing medical attention though for an eating disorder, then we have a medical team working with them at the same time.
Mm.
Um, and sometimes it can be substance use as well. So we'll look at those behaviors occasionally with teens. And again, we're assessing and evaluating whether DBT can treat those or if they need some other form of care.
Sure. So what is the youngest that you treat?
Within our teen program, we've gone as young as like 12 and a half, as long as, kind of the cultural fit of the group works out okay. It's a lot harder if we have like mostly seniors and then this one like young preteen, but we have been able to successfully mesh when we've had a good composition of the group where they're, somewhere around the same lifestyle. That's what we kind of look for. They've got some lifestyle similarities. They can kind of understand one another.
Yeah.
And we're, oh, sorry, just to
Yeah,
offer another thing. So we have also been trying to adapt skills training on a one-on-one basis for those people who maybe wouldn't be a fit in the group because there are so few options for that age range outside of like IOP in the area.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find that you are frequently booked up, like you're not taking any more clients, or that's frequently what we experience when we're trying to find a fit for families? What's that like for your clinic?
Yeah, it has been kind of a roller coaster. Of course, COVID, everyone was booked and had huge wait lists, and we had that problem for the longest time. I would say early last year, we finally got off of a wait list,
Okay.
and now the wait is generally just a matter of, how soon can we get them scheduled, maybe 1 or 2 weeks. So that's really great news. As long as someone has some availability, evenings, then we can usually get them in.
Yeah. Do you do your work in person, virtually, or both?
Both. Right now we have our groups still online. We would love to have groups back in person, but we've had a hard time getting everyone on board with that at the same time.
Yeah. Yep.
So we're offering the groups virtually until we can convince people to come back in person. And there's some individual in-person work. And then also the option is to do telehealth as well.
Okay. And then is this the kind of thing that has a timeline for how, like it's structured, or it just kind of keeps going until they don't need it anymore?
Yeah, really great question. So we use 6 months of treatment as kind of the guideline. For adolescents, often that is enough time to make the treatment goals or that we have been looking for. Sometimes we'll keep them going depending upon what behaviors are showing up. If it's life-threatening behavior, then they'll stay in group longer. If it's not, then individual DBT can be enough to help them continue making the other progress that they need. For adults, Same thing, we start out with 6 months and evaluate, kind of around the 4 month mark. How are things going? Do we need to keep you in skills training or do we do less? A lot of the research, most of it from Marsha Linehan's lab, was on 1 year of comprehensive DBT for adults. And so, we do encourage that because the 1 year really strengthens the skills training to hear everything through twice. Although for some people, that's kind of out of reach. It's hard to make that financial and also time commitment. So, we'll do what we can to help people still maintain their skills after those initial 6 months.
Yeah, yeah. And then kind of on that same line of the financial commitment to that, what do you take insurance of any kind? And you don't have to speak to like the exact pricing or anything, but like how do you work with families on that part?
Yeah. So unfortunately, we don't work with insurance anymore. That hasn't worked out for us.
I understand.
We've tried. So, we'll encourage families and try to empower them to work with their insurance company directly to get
Right.
some agreements between the client and the insurance company. Otherwise, we're considered out of network and we provide super bills.
Yeah.
We also have a what we call a scholarship program, which people can apply for if they have a financial need, and we can give them a sliding scale.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so then is it kind of based on how many sessions a week they need and how involved the family is in their sessions? Because I imagine it's several hours a week that families, from if it's a teen, the teen might have 2 sessions, the family, is it like a package or is it hour by hour?
Oh yeah, great question. So actually for standard adolescent DBT, it's the once a week group that everybody attends, and there's one fee for that. And then the individual session for the teen.
Okay.
So there's really, to start out, just those 2 sessions. We'd add additional things if it's necessary, but for the most part, we're trying to stick with the standard DBT and help the clients, get their needs met with those 2 things.
Got it. And the parent is involved in that group. So that's kind of combined. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't sound as massive as I think what I was imagining at first, right? Because when you hear like, oh, and we support family and we're this and that, but then there's always like, well, how much is that? And I don't want people to be scared off by, like this commitment. I know because the services that we have are a financial commitment too. And it's so hard. It's hard with insurance companies too. I wish that it were easier to work with them, but I understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so how do people contact your clinic and what do they experience when they reach out?
Yeah. So they can either call our intake line, or they can reach out to us through a link on our website to set up an initial consultation with our intake coordinator. And so if they do that, they get on the calendar, and Shauna, our intake coordinator, she's wonderful. She reaches out at that scheduled time, and they have about 15 minutes to pick her brain about our whole program and, all those details like finances and whatnot.
Yeah.
She's a great resource. She's been with us for almost 2 years now, and we love her. So she does it all for us.
Great. Yeah, I have found that having an option for people to schedule the time that they can be called works out really well.
Absolutely. Everybody's busy,
prepared.
so it really does help.
Yeah, but also talking on the phone with somebody or having a Zoom or something, I always feel like, I would rather speak with somebody that way than through email. You just don't really get to ask all the questions or get all the little nuances if you communicate by email. And so, but not everybody has time. So if you can schedule an actual time to do it, it makes for better conversation.
Yeah, we've left an option.
And if people are listening to this instead of watching, what is the website?
Sure. It's DBT, as in Dialectical Behavior Therapy Center, CENTER, S as in Silicon, V as in Valley.com. DBT Center, SV.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to capture this this meeting live. And I hope this makes it easier for people to reach out when they need the help that you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for pushing me to do it. It was fun.
Absolutely. Thank you.